Hi, welcome, welcome. I'm super excited to be here and get to paint with you guys. I've got this really darling Mistletoe Mice painting that I'm going to share with you. So let's just get into it, all right? For materials, I'm going to show you my palette to start. So I've got my primary colors plus black and white, red, yellow, blue, black, white. I'm gonna mix up all of my secondary colors and my brown, but if you have green available, if you have brown available, you wanna work with those, feel free to. If you're working with these type of paints, like craft paints, rather than trying to mix anything, I highly recommend just grabbing the colors that you see in the reference painting. These don't necessarily mix well. So when we take blue and yellow with these type of paints, when we mix them, we don't always get green. Sometimes we get gray. So just something to keep in mind. If you're working with these, it's best to just grab the colors that you see in the reference. All right, for brushes, I showed you my palette. So for brushes, I've got 3 brushes, a large, medium, and a small. This is my large brush. I have a 1-inch flat. Anything you have that's big that can cover a lot of canvas ground quickly works perfectly. I'm gonna call that my daddy brush. For my medium-sized brush, I grabbed a 1/2-inch flat, but again, anything you have that's medium-sized will work. And I have a small detail brush, of course, for those small little details. I'm gonna call my brushes Daddy, Mama, and Baby. I name the brushes as I paint, just so it's really easy to let you know which brush to use when. I've also got a cup with water to wash my brushes. I've got a rag or paper towel to wipe the brushes on after I wash them. And then of course I have my canvas. I'm working on a 16 by 20-inch canvas, but you can work on any size that works for you. All right, fantastic. So while you're gathering up your materials, I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Maria. I go by Miss Pickles because I obsess about pickles. They're like my favorite thing in the world. And I have been a full-time artist for about 7 years, but I've been making art my whole life. It is the absolute joy of my life that I get to do this. I feel like if you would have told the little kid version of me that used to watch Bob Ross on PBS that I got to do this for a living, she would absolutely faint. It would be such a dream. And so much of that is because of the support of people that paint along with me. I always like to describe myself as a sort of interactive artist. And I'm glad that I get to interact with you today. So let's get into painting. Yes, the joy of it. So first things first, we're gonna work on our background. Of course, as we're working, feel free to use that pause button as needed. And let's get into it. All right, so we're gonna start with the big flat brush, and I'm gonna call this the daddy brush. And I'm gonna get my surface wet. So I'm gonna wet the ground. So I get right into my paint water cup, get some water, and I'm gonna start just applying some moisture to my canvas. That helps the paint to move as we work. And while you're wetting your canvas, I'm gonna give you a quick rundown of how I work, just so you know what to expect while we're painting together. So I'm gonna give you a verbal instruction, so I'll tell you what we're gonna do. Then I'll do a visual demonstration, so I'll show you what we're gonna do. And then if you want to access like a written out steps, check out my blog on my website, MsPicklesPaints. There'll be like posted instructions for you, which I find actually really, really helpful. I try to cover all the bases, sort of, you know, people who listen well to learn, people who visually learn, and then people who need to read. So all of those covered. And yeah, hopefully that gave you time. So first step was to get your canvas wet, and then we need to apply a thin wash of white paint. Having the water already on there helps a whole lot with that. So I'm gonna get right into some white with that daddy brush. And I'm just going to vertical brush strokes, cover my background with some white paint. Not the most interesting visual demonstration, but you know, it's got to be done. So as we are applying some white, I'm going to talk you through our background, which is relatively simple. We're going to cover the canvas with some white paint. We're going to mix up a quick brown, and then we'll streak some of that brown vertically through the top more than 3/4, majority of the canvas. We'll streak that brown in vertically, and then we'll use a little bit of brown horizontally at the bottom just to establish sort of the ground or a little bit of a horizon. As you're working, if your paint starts drying, dip the tip of your bristles into your water cup and just apply a little more water. And again, that water just helps the paint to move. Water's kind of the magic sauce when you're working with acrylics. Awesome. So I've got a nice thin coat of white paint applied to my canvas. Again, as we're working together, feel free to pause the video as you need. So take a quick pause if you need a moment before you get into that brown. If you have brown available, you can just skip forward a bit. But for those of you who don't, I'm going to grab my mama brush and I'm going to mix one up. So I like to think of a very simple brown as dark orange plus a little bit of black. So dark orange, I think, is the easiest way of mixing a brown. So I'm going to grab some yellow. I'm going to grab a little bit of red. Get a quick orange happening. A little bit more red. Just like that. And I'm going to add just a tiny bit of black to that. If you're mixing along with me, when you go to add the black, add the smallest bit, like a little dot in the corner of your bristles. Black is powerful, and it tends to overwhelm yellow and red really easily. And it's easy, so I have a brown here, but I'm going to add a little bit more black. I want it a little darker. It's easy to add more black to something, but you can imagine if I had gone in with a big sort of clump of black right at the beginning, would have been difficult to, well, you can't really take the black away. You have to add more yellow, more red. So add black slowly and go ahead and mix up a brown. Again, if you're mixing one up, it's yellow plus red plus tiny amounts of black. I'll give you a second there. All right. So I've got a nice brown. Also, if you have a palette knife, great to mix your paints with a palette knife. Saves you in paint over time. So, got a nice brown to work with. I'm going to come on in, back to my daddy brush. And I'm going to grab a little bit of that brown. And I'm going to start streaking it vertically through the top portion of the canvas. I would use little amounts, small amounts at a time. I always like to say that with painting, it should be sort of an addition game instead of, you know, we can start with small amounts of paint. And if we want more, we can always add more, but it's difficult if you grab a big clump of brown to kind of take it away. So I recommend always kind of just working with small amounts of paint. Again, easy to add, very difficult to take away. So I've got some brown streaked in through the sort of top area. And now I want to come in and create the ground. Say it's right about there. And I'm going to use brown and a little bit of white. And I'm using horizontal brush strokes here. Just creating the ground where my little mice friends are going to hang out. We should name them. Maybe Mateo and Maria. Mateo and Maria. I love that. So I've got the ground painted in. I've got some vertical streaks of brown happening. And the last thing I want you to do with your background, and again, feel free to take your time, pause as you need. The last thing I want you to do is paint the rims of your canvas if you're working on a stretched canvas. So just take some of that white, streak in some of that brown. The idea is to take the color that hits the edge of your canvas and just wrap it around the rim. And the reason for that, my friends, is so that when your painting hangs on the wall, it looks continuous. It doesn't look like you have the sort of just blank raw edge. You know, you'd see this at certain angles. So it's nice to have, again, the color that hits the edge of your canvas wrapped around the rim. It just looks like a very finished piece. So go ahead and pause the video. Take your time finishing up with the background. I will be back in a little bit and we're gonna mix up some green and we're gonna start painting in the mistletoe. All right, I'll see you guys in just a few. All right, so once you have that brown streaked in vertically, you've got some horizontal brown and white streaked in, what I want you to do next is add just a couple little details to the background. Doesn't have to be a lot. You could do a lot, you could do a little, up to you. But I'm gonna start by creating some sort of board separations here. And then I'm gonna create some knots so we start getting the effect that there's wood happening here. All right, I'm gonna work with both the mama and the baby brush for this. So I'm gonna start with the mama brush and I'm gonna use the sort of skinny edge, the slender edge of this flat brush to create those long lines for the board separation. If you feel more comfortable doing this with a small detail brush, feel free. That totally works. I'm gonna grab just a little bit of black just to darken my brown up just a bit. All right, so I'm gonna try to find the approximate center of my canvas. I'm gonna say it's right about here. And I'm just gonna create a line down the center. And then another line kind of splitting the distance. And another one over here. Boop. Okay, so I've got my 3 lines, kind of making that look like separate boards. You can do a little bit more in terms of detailing here. You could have this look more like the edge of a board here by thickening that up just a bit. You can drag more short vertical lines to make it look like wood grain. Apologize if my lines aren't super straight, but painting at an angle, you know what I mean? If you do get a couple lines like I did here, where it's just not so super straight, you can come back in with a little bit of white and just lightly brush over it. No biggie. Add a little bit more of this white through here. Now at this point, you may be trying to copy what I'm doing exactly. Oh, she said put some white here. I totally get it. Especially if you have a perfectionist kind of gene inside of you that you want to be able to do everything that I'm telling you to do exactly as I'm doing it. I get it. But in painting, that's not going to necessarily benefit you. So I'm glad you're here if you're a perfectionist. Because painting today is going to kind of force you outside of your comfort zone a little bit. And what I'll tell you is the people that enjoy these type of painting tutorials the most are ones that are able to let go of the idea that their painting at the end has to look like this one. They have the most fun, they have the best paintings. So I highly recommend letting go of the idea that your painting has to look exactly like this to be successful. I think a lot of times when we start painting, and we're painting from references or from somebody else's painting, we get really wrapped up in the idea of the value of what we're making being how much it looks like the thing we're painting from, whether it's a photograph again or somebody else's painting. That will get you into trouble, and that will get you frustrated and not wanting to paint anymore super, super fast. And in fact, the best thing about artists is sort of their individualism, right? So don't be scared to take chances and try something that maybe I'm not doing, or maybe finding something that fits in the way that you're doing that you like, even if it doesn't look like mine. That's amazing. So yeah, never judge your value as an artist based on how much the work that you're creating looks like somebody else's. Don't compare yourself, I guess. It's good life advice too, right? Okay, so I've got in some sort of wood grain streaks. I've got in those board separations. And then the last thing I'm gonna do is create those little knots in the wood. I'm gonna use my baby brush for that. I'm gonna grab some of that brown. And I'm gonna be creating lines that kind of curve around themselves. Let's see if I can show you better than I can tell you. So I'm using my baby brush. I'm gonna start with a little, like a portion of a circle here. And I have another line that comes down and curves around and down. Something like that. And maybe I'll make another one over here. Maybe I have two of those little curved lines. And you don't need a ton of these to get the effect. You know, I have 3 in this example that I'm making. But you could have less, you could have more, but just a few will do. This painting is not necessarily about the wood or the wood grain. That's just our background. It's just where our sweet little mice, Maria and Mateo, are hanging out. All right. So this was the background. So we started with some white, streaked in some brown, created some wood separation, some wood plank separation lines, created a little bit of a wood grain effect just by making vertical lines with the brown, and then finished up with a couple knots in the wood. If you want to pause here, just have another look at the ones that I made. Again, they don't have to look like mine to be super successful, so don't get wrapped up in that idea. All right, so go ahead and finish up with your background. Make sure your rims are painted, and then I will see you guys in a little bit, and we'll get started on our mistletoe. All right, so the mistletoe. We need a green to work with. If you have one already, beautiful, fantastic. If you need to mix one up, go ahead and follow me. I'm gonna mix this with my medium-sized brush, my mama brush, and I'm gonna grab a scoop of yellow, a little bit of blue, all right, fantastic. And I'm gonna add just a tiny, tiny bit of black to that. Looking for a nice, rich, kind of emerald green. So I'm going to start by creating a few stems right around the upper sort of halfway part of the canvas. And then I'm going to start making leaves coming down underneath, coming almost to the vertical and horizontal halfway. So I'm going to start with a couple of stems. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Why not 5? There we go. I'm going to leave a little bit of space for my bow. And I'm going to start making leaves. So I find the easiest way to make leaves with this, if you have a flat brush, is to just make 2 short lines, kind of push down. Just like that. Again, your leaves likely will look different than mine. That's a good thing. All right. I think one of the first things to conquer when you first start painting is getting used to the idea that it takes time and practice and confidence to be able to create the type of marks that you want. So if you struggle to make thin lines, that's something that takes practice. And with time you'll get. And the more that you spend, you know, an hour or 2 painting here or there, the easier it will become. So if you struggle a little bit with those things, know that that's normal. I certainly struggled when I first started. And you see other artists doing it and you're like, oh man, it looks so easy. It's because for me, I've painted a whole bunch of leaves. I have a technique that I like. I like to think of this as kind of brush control. And brush control is just the idea that you can take your brush, make a line or color field, and you're very confident in it. You don't have to spend any time in your head thinking, okay, I'm making one brush stroke and another brush stroke. It becomes a muscle memory, and that takes a lot of practice. But once you get there, it's beautiful, and painting really opens up for you because you don't have to spend a lot of time in your mind thinking, okay, 1 brush stroke, 2 brush stroke. It just happens. So, and honestly, 99% of it is just confidence. So if you can, practice delusional confidence. That's gotten me like everything that I could ever want in this world. It's delusional confidence, believing that I can. So, and if not, just keep painting. You'll get there. All right, so I think I've got a good amount of leaves for this little bunch of mistletoe. Maybe I make a couple little stems in there. I had stems in this, yeah. So maybe a couple of these have some little stems showing. Yeah, that's good. All right. So go ahead and press pause if you need, and finish up with your mistletoe. And next we're going to paint in that big red ribbon. So this step again was to start with a green if you needed to mix one. It's yellow, blue. I used a tiny bit of black. And then I used my medium-sized brush, my mama brush, to create lots of little leaves and a couple of stems. So take a quick pause if you need. And if we are ready, if you're back, let's get into making that big bow. Now I chose to make the center of my bow a heart. You don't have to make that same choice if that is not your vibe. I totally get it. It's awful cutesy. But I like that vibe, so I'm gonna stick with it. So I'm gonna mix myself up a little tiny bit of red, and I'm gonna grab just the tiniest bit of black right in the corner of my bristles, just to darken up a little bit of that red. Okay. And I'm gonna start by making that heart. Get a little symmetrical here. There we go. Both sides were kind of like distant cousins. And I'm gonna grab a little bit more black, in the corner of my bristle and just paint that around the heart and just give it a little shadow. And now I'm going to go ahead and create those big shapes. I'm doing all of this with my Mama brush and red. That red that I added just a tiny bit of black to. I'm going to start by getting an idea of where I want the sides of the bow to be. If that makes sense. So there's going to be sort of the sides of my bow. And then I'm going to drag lines in to the center. And I'm going to thicken up sort of the side here. And same thing over here. And then I'm going to create the little tails for the bow. And I keep mentioning this, but as I'm working, if you feel like, oh, she's moving too fast, don't worry if you're not keeping up or keeping the same pace as I am. That's pretty standard. You can just feel free to pause it whenever you need to. Okay? Great. So I'm going to just make the little tails of my bow on both sides. And then I'm going to thicken them up. All right, same thing on the other side. If, as you're working, you notice that you're seeing a lot of canvas come through as you're painting, so you see like this, it's because the paint is a little thick. So add some water to your bristles, and water will help that paint to really penetrate the surface of the canvas. It'll make your job a lot easier. So. Oh, and there's my little ribbon. So cute. If you need to take a couple minutes to finish up the bow and the ribbon, take a quick pause. When you come back, we'll add some shadow. All right, so shadow, same thing. I'm grabbing a little bit of black in my bristles. I still have red, still working with that Mama brush. And I'm going to brush little bits of black along the outside of the bow here. thing over here. A little bit where that joins the center of the bow, both sides. And then little bits through the tail. Now you could absolutely just leave the bow as just red. I like to add a little bit of shadow and a little bit of highlight to things where I want the viewer's eyes to pay a little more attention. So by adding little bits of black, we'll come back once this is all dry and add a little bit of white highlight. It just makes the bow a little more interesting to look at, which is nice. Very nice, I think. So this step was to create the mistletoe and the bow, and the mistletoe we finished up. The bow was working with that medium-sized brush, my mama brush. I grabbed some red, I added a tiny bit of black to it just to make it a little darker, a little more burgundy. And I created the center of the bow, brushed a little bit of black around the outside, and then created the ties and then the tails for the bow. And once I did that, I added a little bit of black to the ties and the tail. Bring this a little closer if you want to see where I put the black. Take a pause. All right. All right. So you've got the bow, you've got the mistletoe, we're getting there. Let's add our sweet little subjects next, our little mice. For this, I'm gonna mix a gray. So I'm gonna take white and a little bit of black. Add the black slowly. Black is really powerful, so it can overwhelm all the other colors really fast. So it makes sense to take that a little slow. Make that just a tiny bit darker. Again, your gray doesn't have to match mine perfectly. All right, I think that is good. Now, I'm gonna work with the mama brush and I'm gonna create two large shapes for the mice bodies. And I'm gonna start by creating their curved lines for where their rumps are. So I'm gonna say one right here. Ooh, that's probably hard to see. Let me grab a little bit of black in my bristles so it's a little easier. So one right there. And I'm gonna have one right about here. Bring that a little closer in just a sec. There we go. And now I'm going to create, these are almost like a teardrop shape or an almond shape. Say something like this. And something like this. And I'm just going to fill those in. And take your time doing this, and feel free to pause. Also do your best not to get into your head too much about it. If they don't look exactly like mine, your almond shapes, you're going to be just fine, I promise. I need to create a little, because we have one that's sort of, we're seeing the side view as opposed to the back view. So I need to create space for the little mousy brain. So I'm going to do that right here. Just make a little bit of a curved line, just boop, like that. They're so cute. All right, now let's add some ears. I'm gonna grab a little bit of black in my bristles. You don't need to do this. It's just so you can see the shapes I'm making. So you can feel free to paint them in with gray and add some black later. All right, so the ears. I'm gonna say we have an ear that starts about here and one that starts about there. There we go. There's one ear. Grab a little water in my brush. Starting to get a little dry. Here we go. And there's my other little ear. Got a little dark, so I'm just gonna brush a little extra gray in there. There we go. So there's one little mouse. Again, feel free to pause as needed. And let's get into the other little mouse. I'm gonna say the ear is right about here. Comes out and down, something like that. And we would see a little bit of an ear right behind it. We'll just do that. Keep it super simple. All right, so we've got mice, we got their little bodies, we've got their big old ears. Really cute when you exaggerate features. So you can think to keep in mind if you want real kind of cutesy look to animals is exaggerating their features. So let's add some tails. I'm gonna have one tail coming. I had mostly black in my brush. Oops. One tail right here. And then the other tail coming out like this. All right, and now I'm gonna make a couple areas of our mice a little brighter. All right, so I've got my mice bodies. We started with gray, created those teardrop shapes, made some ears, made some tails, and now I'm gonna grab a little bit of white in my bristles. I didn't wash my brush. I'm just lightening up the gray that's in there. And I'm gonna add a little white belly to my friend here. I'm gonna say this one's Mateo. And I'm gonna add a little bit of white. Through the back of Maria. I guess it's not white, it's light gray, isn't it? So take a couple minutes, finish that up. And we'll keep adding more details to our little mice friends. All right, we good? We're back? Great. Okay, so I'm gonna grab my smaller detail brush for the next bit. So my friend Mateo here, he needs some feet and some arms. And we're just gonna keep those super, super simple. I'm using my small brush and using a little bit of gray, a little bit of black. Create some little feet here. And a couple little arms. Now our mice need eyes. For that, I'm gonna use a little bit of black. So on Mateo here, I'm gonna say his eye is right about there. And I'm gonna give him a little grin. Just looks like a happy mouse. And over here, couple of eyes, and let's make some whiskers. And while I have some black in my brush, I'm going to do a little outlining. So maybe if you don't have any darker tones around your ears, now's a great time to give those a little light outline. We do a little outline around the snout. Do a little bit here with the tail and the bottom of the body. So let's take a quick pause. I'll bring this up closer if you want to pause right now. Fantastic. And hopefully that gave you time to get your mice, the basic information there. And now we can go in and add some of the other elements. So we need to have the pink noses, some pink through their ears, and maybe some additional highlighting. So to mix the pink, I grab my medium-sized brush, grab some white and a tiny bit of red. Now I'm going to paint in the details for this with my small detail brush, my baby brush. But it's good to keep in mind that you want to use a larger brush for mixing, or a palette knife. Palette knives are fantastic. This is such a great tool and they're really inexpensive. If you don't have one and you're painting regularly, I highly recommend picking one up. But you don't want to mix with a small detail brush. The bristles are really delicate, and if you're constantly rubbing them against your palette, they're gonna flay out a lot sooner. So, all right, I'm grabbing some pink. I'm gonna paint in their noses. And I'm gonna run some pink through their ears. Adorable. So go ahead and paint in their little pink noses, add some pink to their ears, and then pause it if you need to. And let's grab some white next. So after you've got in little pink noses, little pink ears, I want you to grab some white. And I'm gonna add some highlights. So I'm working with my baby brush. I'm gonna dot a little white dot into their eye. Brush a little white through their ears. Maybe here along the top of the head. Through the body. So I brushed white through the ears, a couple of little dots, their eyes, through the tails. From a tail, I put a little white through his little hands and feet. I guess those are all feet. Mice don't have hands, do they? And then maybe a little dot of white on the top of both of their noses. Your highlights don't have to be in the same place as mine. As long as you got some white brushed through there, it would look awful cute. So take a quick pause if you need. And since we have white in the bristles of the baby brush, let's go through and add those little berries that mistletoe have. Again, 3. Try to place them where I have a good amount of green. But if you don't have as much green as I have, don't stress or worry. We'll come back and add just a little outline to those to finish this up. So feel free to pause. And since you're back, hopefully you've got your mice, the berries for the mistletoe. I'm gonna brush a little bit of highlight through the bow here. Got a little bit through the tie in the center, a little bit here along the top, along the sides. And I'm going to do a little bit of highlighting through the tails of my bow. Keeping in mind, your highlights don't have to fall in the same place that mine do. Relax and have fun with this. Also, I have more detailed painting tutorials coming out as well, where I really get into why we add highlights the way we do, why we compose things. I shouldn't say we, why I compose things the way I do, why I put highlights where I do, all of those things. So go ahead and finish adding those highlights to your bow. And I will see you in a couple minutes, and we will finish this up by adding a couple more outlines, just defining a few things, and adding some shadow under our mice, and we'll be all done. All right, guys, let's finish this one up. So I want to zigzag a little brown underneath my mice, just showing a little bit of a shadow. So I got a little bit of brown left, not a lot, but enough to do this. I've got my baby brush, I've got a little bit of brown, and I'm just gonna zigzag underneath my mice. And then with black, same thing, baby brush. I'm gonna go through and add little bits of outline around the mistletoe berries. I don't know if they're actually called berries, but that's what they remind me of. And at this point, it's a great time to add a little more definition to anything that you feel like needs to be defined. So I want to add a little bit more definition around some of my leaves. I'm not going to outline each and every leaf. That's a little much. But by creating a little outline around a handful of them, gives them some structure, makes them a little more interesting to look at. Maybe there's a couple little areas of the bow where I want to see a little bit more of a shadow. So work a little more black in those areas. But this is a great time, because I'm kind of done, to take a look at your painting and see if there's anything you want to add, any personality that you want to add to it. I hope you had fun. I hope this was relaxing. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you got to spend some time working on a couple technical things. Again, I talk a lot about brush control, just that beginning thing of being able to use a brush and put paint on a canvas in the way that you see it in your mind. It takes time, and don't get frustrated if it doesn't work out the first couple times you paint. It just takes time. And as you grow in confidence, it'll all get easier. Don't forget to sign your painting. I'm going to sign mine in the bottom right, as one does. Put that That's me. And hey, I would love to see what you made. Like I said, I like to think of myself as sort of an interactive artist, and it is so cool to see what you guys make when you paint with me. So you can DM me on any of the social media sites. I'm Miss Pickles Paints everywhere. So snap a pic, send it over. I promise that people are often way too critical and judgmental of themselves, so I rarely get to see what you make, but it is my favorite thing, and usually they're so good. They may not look like mine, and again, don't get wrapped up in the idea that your value lies in how much your work resembles somebody else's. So don't do that. But yes, you can DM me, Miss Pickles Paints, on any of the social media sites. My email is just hello@MsPicklesPaints.com. And if you found the written instructions on my blog, you have access to my site as well. You can sign in, create an account, and you can message me directly in there as well. So I'm available if you want to talk materials, talk about your journey as an artist. I love to hear from you. So thank you guys so much for painting with me. I hope you have an amazing holiday season. I hope you enjoyed painting these sweet little mistletoe mice. And hopefully I'll get to paint with you again soon. All right? Thank you so much, guys.